Thanks. It's good to be back. It's been about a week that I've been gone, and so it feels like I really haven't left yet. But it's good to be with you. And the reason I'm part of the presentation today is because this was a way to make good on a commitment that I had with Casey, John, and Greg that's really been in the works for quite some time. And we wanted to deliver this training this fall, and since the date that we had scheduled was just a week after me officially leaving, I decided to come back and not put it on my staff to do everything in my absence. So this is something that we've been working toward for a long time. And so anyway, good to be here. And I think the timing actually is really great. We're talking about hiring people with disabilities, hiring veterans, and just last month was National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Less than a week ago, we observed Veterans Day, and so I think the timing in many ways, it's almost meant to be. So this is a way that we can continue to kind of keep those important things on our minds and actually change what we are doing from what we've done in the past. And so that's what we're here to train you about today. We did want to start just by making sure that you had a good understanding of some background politically as to what has led up to this today. So that's what we'll start in with as we dive in today. So we'll be talking about the political background, also logistics of the two programs of both the Aesop and VEOP. Those are acronyms, by the way, and if you're not familiar with them, we're going to spell those out for you during the training today, both of those programs. Some considerations as we use those programs, and then managing the liability. So that's what we plan to cover today. So a little bit on the political background. Back in October of 2007, Governor Huntsman issued an executive order, October 19th, that made state of Utah government the model employer of people with disabilities. So that executive order definitely establishes the vision of what was intended to be accomplished, but not necessarily the vehicles. And so that was the first step politically. The interim period between the signing of that executive order and legislation, which we'll talk about in just a minute, was this. In 2008 and 9, so the executive order was signed in 2007, 2008 and 9, legislation was introduced but not passed. There were some problems with the legislation. There was actually, in 2009, the only problem with the legislation. I actually watched this happen because I was on a task force that researched what other states are doing in terms of hiring people with disabilities. We went to Sacramento, California, and found out what they were doing. They were the state that had been the most advanced at the time. And so, anyway, the problem in the 2009 session was just the evening of the last night of session. I was watching the bill come up to be read. It would have gone through, I think, pretty easily, but the legislature had so many bills still left on the docket and just not enough time. And it was, I think, about 11 down on the list, and they decided they were done last night of the session. So that was the only problem that year, and so it didn't pass in 2009. 2008, there were some other technical problems with the bill, and those were fixed in 2009. So this really was a long period of time before legislation passed that really helped provide a vehicle. So in 2010, House Bill 17 passed. It was signed into law, and this created what is called the Alternative State Application Program. So if you've heard of the Aesop program, now you know what the acronym stands for, Alternative State Application. And that really just helps us understand what those vehicles are, what the structure needed to be put in place to really make some changes in hiring people with disabilities. Are we okay technically, or do we need to?
We're sure we're streaming. Yeah. Tell them to refresh. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. No problem. So that was House Bill 17 in 2010 that passed. So the Alternative State Application Program is designed to quickly appoint qualified people with disabilities to career service positions. Career service meaning that an employee has property rights to their position once they've passed probation. That's why this program was put into place, is to appoint those people into a career service position and yet possibly avoid the competitive process that normally people have to go through. So they'd replace that instead, this legislation established, that they would replace that with an on-the-job examination period rather than going through a more formal interviewing and process that way. So since 2010, very few state agencies have adopted the program. It's not that it hasn't been utilized, but it's honestly been, it's been minimally used. What that legislation did is really gave a vehicle that if agencies were to fully adopt them, it can be an effective tool. If an agency doesn't fully adopt it, it's legislation that basically sits there and doesn't really make an impact on day-to-day operations. So that's part of the problem, is that there haven't been a lot of agencies that really understood it and therefore moved forward in fully adopting it. So we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute. So structure's in place, but state agencies have to adopt it in order to make it effective. Now, another piece of the background is that when the State Office of Rehabilitation merged with Workforce Services, this happened officially just over a year ago, that also gave an opportunity for John to realize, because of the close association with Office of Rehabilitation, that Workforce Services really could and should do more to be a model employer of people with disabilities. We have an opportunity, and rehabilitation, in fact, I was talking with Leah Labato for a few minutes before this training began. Office of Rehabilitation really did adopt this program early on, and so they understand a lot more of how it can be utilized, how it can be effective, and even some of the pitfalls to it as well, and how we can avoid that. So John saw an opportunity to do that. So he is now asking all Workforce Services leadership to adopt the alternative state application process into its hiring practices. Rather than it just being an option that HR provides, it's something the executive director is asking its leadership to adopt formally. One other piece with, and then we'll move on from the political background, but in 2014, House Bill 237 passed the legislative session. I'm sorry, 327. What number did I say? 237. Yeah. So 327 passed. That was in the 2014 session. It was signed into law on May 13th of 2014. And what that law does is allows for veterans to be hired into designated career service positions, not just any career service position, but there are certain positions designated that a veteran could be hired into, and also avoid going through the formal competitive process that you normally have to go through to fill that career service position. So hiring officials may choose to interview and hire a qualified veteran who has opted into this program separately from other candidates. That's what that law established. So there's some political background so that we can understand what has put all of these things into place today. So question before we move forward. Most, if not all of you, have gone through the outward mindset training and have been looking at those principles and trying to adopt them. The question is the concept of giving preferential or advantageous treatment to veterans or to people with disabilities, is that an inward or an outward thing? Outward. Dale says outward. And why do you think, Dale? We get a mic.
This will teach me not to ask. Just because it's just the right thing to do.
I think you're right. It's just the right thing to do, and really, it's something that helps us to see it's not just about am I comfortable with doing what I've always done before, or do we really owe something to people who have served our country? And can we help people who might be able to do a fantastic job with some reasonable accommodations to get a position? There are barriers that they deal with that many of us don't. And so I agree with that. It really is just the right thing to do.
So is that saying with all other things being equal, or when we talk about preferential treatment?
Can I have you repeat the
Yeah,
question? Go ahead.
Fine. So when we say advantageous or preferential treatment, how do we apply a standard? Because typically the approach has been all other things being equal, choose a veteran or choose a person that has other disabilities. So is there a way to define that, or is it just kind of a situation by situation issue?
Yeah, so I mean, just what you described, all other things being equal, and that's I think just the thing. We rarely, if ever, actually see where all other things are really equal. But the concept you describe, if all other things are equal and we have an opportunity to hire someone who's a veteran or a disability, then we ought to be doing that. That's, excuse me, that's what we're talking about with, there is some preferential treatment. If we can give that person an opportunity to do the job and they're the right person, they're the right fit, they're qualified, then that's what we ought to do. So, good question. So, we're going to talk for a minute about how Aesop works, and I'll turn the time over to Aaron Reed to give us those technical details.
Hi everyone, those of you who don't know me, I'm Aaron Reed. I'm one of the HR analysts that work with the hiring managers on recruitments. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the process with you. So first, how Aesop works. First step, obviously, you advertise a position with your HR analyst, just like normal. We don't do anything different. Second step is we are notified by our HR admin office when an Aesop applicant applies on your recruitment, and then we will call you up and let you know that you have an Aesop applicant on there. We then review the qualifications with you to see if it's someone that you would want to consider under the Aesop program. So then after we kind of look at qualifications, you have three options at this point. The first option is a non-competitive interview, which means that you can take the Aesop applicants and interview just the Aesop applicants. You can even do this before the recruitment closes. So say you posted your recruitment today and tomorrow an Aesop applicant applies, and you want to take that applicant, then you can kind of start the interview process even before your recruitment has closed. So that kind of helps you kind of get through the recruitment process a little bit faster if that's something you want to do. You do want to make sure that you're using the same interview questions as even if you were going through a regular competitive recruitment. On this option, you can as well have kind of a smaller interview panel. So it could be as simple as just you as the hiring manager meeting with this Aesop applicant, or maybe you just want to have you and one other person on the panel. That is an option if you want to do that. I went a little too fast. The second option is to do a competitive interview with a bump up. So on this option, we wait until the recruitment closes and we score the applicants as normal. But if your Aesop applicant didn't quite score high enough to be in your interview pool, we can bump them up and include them in your interview pool. We don't change their score or anything like that. It just adds them into your interview pool. And then your third option is just a standard competitive interview process. You're only interviewing the Aesop applicant if they score higher enough to be in your interview pool. So then if you decide to use one of the first two options and an Aesop applicant is selected, then they start working and they have a 6-month examination period that starts on their first day. So they're a scheduled TL for those 6 months. It is recommended that you do a monthly performance evaluations during those 6 months just to kind of keep track and have that documentation. Then when the new hire successfully completes that 6-month TL period, just notify your HR analyst, and at that time, they become a Schedule B, and their 12-month probation period starts. Then once they pass the 12-month probation period, they attain their career service status. Do you guys have any questions on the Aesop process before I move on? Okay, so where could an inward mindset get in the way of results? No one?
Having to make a special accommodation and, you know, the time and cost of something like that might be an inward mindset. So you want me to repeat it? Oh, I'm not talking again. I think potentially maybe, you know, if it's a situation where you have to make special accommodations for the individual to be able to perform the job, I can see an inward mindset taking notice of that.
That's more over here.
Where I work, excuse me, where I work at the Division of Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, almost all of our people that apply are deaf or hard of hearing. So, and we have had some ASAP candidates, and when I'm kind of thinking selfishly, or the inward mindset, I'm thinking everyone that's applying for this job, or almost everyone, has a disability. Why should this person get any special treatment? And if they're having to go this route, they must not be very good. And that was my first thought. So just being very honest there.
Right.
But it doesn't always turn out that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and that's a good comment, but that's why, I mean, we do go over their qualifications beforehand, talk that over with you, make sure they have like minimum qualifications and things like that. But it's a process that can also kind of make it quicker for you. A lot of people are like, oh, recruiting, it's the worst. Like, it takes forever. Sometimes it takes weeks. But I mean, you can start your interview process with these candidates even before it closes and kind of speed that process along. So it can actually benefit you and be really helpful. Anything else? Okay, so the Veteran Employment Opportunity Program, this is the VEOP. So the first step here, you advertise a qualified position through your HR analyst. We have a list of qualified positions that we look at, but honestly, I haven't run into a position that DWS recruits for that isn't on that list, so most of them are a qualified position. And it is a public recruitment on the VEOP. And we also include the supplemental question. We've been doing this for a while, so I think you guys have all at least seen the supplemental question that we include. Basically, it just kind of explains the VEOP program a little bit, asks if they are a veteran and want to be considered in the VEOP program, and then asks them to upload their DD-214 to be eligible. The next step here is we notify you about the VEOP candidates after the recruitment closes. So since it is a supplemental question, we don't really filter on that until after the recruitment is closed. So those two steps are really the only logistical differences between the ASAP and VEOP. So step 3 on VEOP, we review the candidate's qualifications with you. And then you have the 3 options that you can decide from. So again, the first option is a non-competitive interview where you as the hiring manager can decide just to interview those VEOP candidates. Again, you'll want to make sure you're using the same interview questions that you would if you're going through the regular competitive recruitment. Second option is the competitive interview with a bump up, where if the VEOP candidate doesn't quite score high enough to be in your interview pool, we just kind of bump them up to be included on your referred list. And then the third option, just the standard competitive recruitment, where you're just interviewing them if they score high enough to be in your interview pool. Okay. So then, if you do one of the first two options and the VEOP candidate is selected, then when they start, they have the 6-month examination period where they are scheduled TL. And then once they, again, you want to make sure you're doing your monthly evaluations, performance evaluations, just kind of keep track of how they're doing. Then when they successfully complete the 6-month TL period, you notify your HR analyst and we make them a Schedule B, and that's when their probation period starts. So they have their 12-month probation from that point, and then once they successfully complete that, then they attain their career service status. Any questions on VEOP? Hope. Okay, Armin's up.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So this is Leah Lobato with the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation and the Governor's Committee on Employment of People with Disabilities. If somebody qualifies both for ASAP and for VEOP, is there anything that happens there? Because a veteran could have a disability. I don't know how those two work together, and I've never asked that question.
Yeah, it is a possibility. So, I mean, if they applied under the Aesop program, we would probably be notified earlier. So we'd probably start with the hiring manager asking if they wanted to use the Aesop program. And then if for some reason they didn't, and then the recruitment closes, then if they said yes and uploaded their DD 214, then yeah, they could be considered under the VEOP as well.
Hi, I'm Mike Wallenstein, also with Rehabilitation. Looking at the slide that says yes, no, maybe, are there any special considerations when it's a clear no?
What do you mean?
Not deciding that you're not going to hire this person. In this part of this process, can you say this person doesn't have the qualifications, we're going to pass?
Right, yeah, at any part of the process. So at first, when we first notify you that it's an ASAP or a VEOP candidate and give you, say, hey, do you want to do this? You can say, yes, I want to participate in the program, or no, I don't want to.
Okay.
And if you do interview them and they're just not a good fit, they don't have the qualifications, then even at that point you could say, no, we don't want to offer to this person.
But you can go no before you even interview?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to make a comment on that. Aaron's exactly right, and that's a great question. The decision not to use the program, though, what John and the Executive Director's Office is asking is that if you decide not to use it, it's got to be because you've consulted with HR and you've determined they're really not qualified for this position, rather than, I don't really want to go through the rigmarole. It might be easier to just do what I've always done. That's specifically what the Executive Director's Office is saying. No, we're going to engage. We're going to use this process. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Another question?
I'm sorry, my voice is not cooperating today. I'm Marilyn Call again with the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. My question is, how does a person with a disability know about the ASAP program? How come some know and some don't?
Right. On the state jobs website, there is a big section that talks about the ASAP program and what the applicant does on their end. There is a form that they need to send to our HR admin office. And then when they apply on the recruitments, they do have to notify the contact there that they have applied on the recruitment. And on the website, it goes through all of the steps and explains all the process for them.
And this is Leah Lobato again. So we share it at the Workability Job Fair. DHRM has a booth at the fair, and they also do a workshop at the fair. And then the business relations team with USOR is sharing it with our VR counselors and any other groups that work with individuals with disabilities to make sure that they're aware of the Alternative State Application Program. So we're trying to get it out as broadly as we can so that people are aware of it and are actually using the process.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good thing to bring up. That's kind of the biggest issue that we've had with both the ASAP and the VEOP program is we're not getting people who apply on the positions using the program. We don't see a lot of ASAP applicants right now, but I know that Leah's working hard, and even the counselors at the rehab centers are reaching out to those people more and letting them know, hey, this program is available. So make sure that you're utilizing it. I think that the employment counselors are also, those that are working with the vets are trying to help let them know about the VEOP as well. The biggest problem with the VEOP program is the vets will apply and say, yes, I want to be considered, but they're not uploading their DD-214 to their application, and that makes them not eligible. We can't include them in that if it's not there. So we've kind of been asking the employment counselors to kind of let them know about that as well and reach out. Bruce has a comment in the back. If you give him the mic.
Aaron, I just want to make a comment on the DD-214, because when they upload or put their DD-214 in, it's never going to say if they're a disabled veteran or not.
Right.
It's only going to say on the bottom they're going to be medically discharged. The DD-214 will give them a list of their service and the reasons for their leaving the service. And so if you do need to know what their disability rating is or want to know, that'll come from the VA, but that DD-214 will only show the type of discharge from military, and that'll usually list as a medical discharge.
Right, right. So then in that instance, we would have them under the VEOP program, but if they also wanted to be considered under the Aesop program, they'd have to follow that process as well. Any other questions? Okay.
I'm pretty sure everybody kind of knows who I am, but just in case, I'm Armin Drummond. I've been a specialist here for the last couple of years, and then with Bart's untimely departure, DHRM asked me to step into his role, and so I'll now be the HR field director for the Department of Workforce Services. So this would probably end up being my last official specialist-related, liability-based activity as well. So you guys aren't going to have to talk to me about stuff as much. You're going to be so happy. So some of the considerations that we wanted to talk about for using ASAP. There are some real issues that can come into play, and kind of put them up here. There is a potential for above average needs, both for support and mentoring. As Aaron had mentioned, it's a very strongly held recommendation that you have during that 6-month trial period an at least monthly sit down with that employee to discuss in detail where they're at, where they're struggling, what things need to happen, where they're succeeding. It really is designed to be an opportunity to see if they're truly going to be a good fit before they move over into the probationary period. And that's more time, and often you don't have a whole lot of time, but it's really important to dedicate those resources and that time so that we can get the best level of success possible. It does require some of the right supports to be in place. Because you're talking about dealing with people who have disabilities, it is understood right from the beginning that there will likely be, in many cases, some needs for ADA accommodations to be in place right from the beginning, and we're going to need to be attacking that issue right from the start. And so we've got to be on top of those things and looking out for that and making sure that we're putting everything in place so that the person has the very best opportunity for success in the job. And it is entirely possible that the person you're going to select through this process, because you jumped the competitive process a little bit, that they will end up, on occasion, possibly being a poor fit. And that puts you right back at the beginning. Now you're going to remove that person because you're allowed to, because they've got the 6-month trial period that didn't end up being successful, and even if they pass that, you've got the full probationary period. So you still have the same options of removing a person who is a poor fit for the job, but you're now starting out from scratch doing the recruitment all over again. So there are some issues there. Marilyn, you had a question.
Yeah, this is more of a comment, because I know maybe a lot of people in other branches of DWS aren't aware that there's like the different divisions in USOR. We have like at least 3 people that could go do an on-site evaluation and help you know what, I mean, there really are some low-cost options for deaf and hard-of-hearing people to be successful on the job. It just takes a lot of creativity, but we would be glad to send people
Right.
over to your office at no cost to help you know,
Good. Yes.
you know, what really could help the person succeed.
Thank you. We definitely want to make sure that if we're doing nothing else, we're using all of the resources that we actually have in-house to be able to address any issue. So, yes, thank you.
This is Leah Lobato again. I'd like to offer the same services from the business relations team. And honestly, most accommodations are very cost-effective, under $50, and are very easy to put in place. So I don't want people to panic about accommodations.
Right.
The other piece about that is that Tom Smith or myself, we don't get offended easily. We want you guys to ask us the tough questions you have about disability and employment. We're not going to tell you you're doing something wrong or scold you or do any of those things. That's what we do with business partners every day. So feel free to give us a call and say, okay, we have an ASAP candidate and I'm a little scared. What do I need to do and how do I need to approach this and how do I even talk to them or talk about their situation? That's all services and support we can provide and make sure that you guys are comfortable through the process.
Good. Thank you. Okay.
You mentioned you can.
Oh,
Well, I'm competing, Mike Wallenstein, competing with these two. Center for Assistive Technology can also help with that assessment
Good.
as well.
so yeah, we have lots of resources within the DWS house that are available to taking those. And so we've kind of addressed this again, but I want to look back at this again. How does your mindset really affect these potential very real disadvantages? That's a real question. We're going to have to send these guys, Bruce on the back here. Going to have to send y'all back through outward mindset training again. Make Bart come, start all over.
You know, I think one of the comments that we hear quite frequently is that inward mindset, you know, I don't want to deal with a veteran that maybe everybody thinks all veterans have PTSD. And so we just don't want to get involved with that. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to, you know, get involved with those questions, those concerns, because it may be too hard. And so there's a lot of programs out there now that try to help and educate the public that, you know, just because you're deployed, just because you're in the service does not mean you have PTSD. So.
Right. Over to Lance.
So as a reminder, one of the things that an inward mindset, when I'm primarily focused on my own needs, objectives, and how things impact me, one of the consequences of that is that we don't see things clearly. So Leah gave it a good example. She said most accommodations are very inexpensive. But if I'm too focused on me, my assumptions might be, oh, it's going to be expensive, or the time and effort I have to put into that is just going to be exorbitant. The reality is that's probably not the case. But if I'm too focused on how it impacts me, I blow things out of proportion, and I tend to think it's going to be worse than it really is.
Right. You know, one other thing that I would just point out to you, if you look at this list of potential disadvantages, and you really look at that list, you'll notice something about it. And that is that it doesn't really apply to people of disability or to veterans. It applies to every single person you will ever hire, no matter what kind of competitive process you've put in place for them. You have all had, or if you haven't, you will have, the experience of hiring somebody who you thought, this person's going to be great. And then shortly thereafter, you were like, what was I thinking? Oh my gosh, this person sucks. And then you're calling and saying, how do I get rid of this person? Right? That's why we have a probationary period. And lots of people who do not, you know, have overt known disabilities end up needing to have issues dealt with to help them with medical issues or other disabilities. These are not new. They're not really all that unique to people of disability or to veterans at all. These are things you're going to deal with anyway. So when we recognize that and realize that people with disabilities and veterans who have been disadvantaged through whatever issues, they're just people like the rest of us, and they are fully capable of doing pretty much everything we can do as well. All of these issues kind of start to fade away in terms of applying it to them specifically. So, all right, these are the same. Right, we kind of talked about both of these. They're the same kind of thing, so we won't go over that again. There are some advantages that we want to just make sure that you're looking at. You can fill potentially 2 to 4 weeks faster, which in many cases can be a really advantageous thing. You're getting people who, you're tapping into sources of people who are underserved. And that's just one of the realities of life that we have to accept sometimes, is that people who are disabled and veterans are very often underserved and disadvantaged populations. And it's not because of a lack of skills. It's because of the paradigm that we come into that problem with, and the issues that we have in our head that probably aren't really true. I kind of, I like to think of this in terms of people who are speeding. You know, we have rules against making adverse actions or employment actions against people with disabilities, and makes that illegal. We have the same kind of thing for speeding on the highway. It's illegal to go above the speed limit on the highway. Yet I bet that every single one of you have had the experience of driving at, or maybe even just slightly above the speed limit, going down the highway, and somebody comes up from behind you and just blasts past you as if you were standing still. Right? It happens. There's a law against it, but it happens. If that person gets caught, and usually we're kind of sitting there going, boy, where's the highway patrol when you need it? If that person gets caught, they're going to get punished for it, but it doesn't stop it from actually happening. And if you're sitting there going, no, I've never had that experience, it's because you're probably the person who's blasting past everybody, and you deserve to be caught and punished. But, you know, if they're caught, they're punished, but it still happens. Same thing happens with people with disability. It's illegal to make decisions because of that disability that would keep them from having a job they're qualified for, but it still happens. And so we're trying to just bridge that gap a little bit and get past that and recognize that people with disabilities often have as many or more qualifications as the people who we've been traditionally hiring. So, oh, there was a couple others here. Whoops, I want to go back. Oh, shoot. All right, we'll just keep going forward. We talked about that a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the risk, and I would like to be able to tell you that there's no risk involved in this program. That would be a lie, because there's always some risk involved in everything that you do. You do still have to make sure that you follow the program. You do still have to make sure that you're not asking the illegal and inappropriate questions in whatever interview that you're setting up. And so you do have to do things the right way still. But it is whatever risk is there is exceptionally low. And the reason is twofold. The first is because the courts have very traditionally and very consistently given a great deal of deference to programs that are designed to provide opportunity for disadvantaged groups of people. And so you're just not going to see a lot of traction for somebody who has no disability coming to the courts and trying to say that they're somehow being disadvantaged because somebody with a disability was given an opportunity. That's just never going to go anywhere. It's just funny to think that anybody would try that. But so you've got that historical reality that courts give deference to these kinds of programs. The second thing that goes along with that, though, is that both of these programs are established parts of Utah code. They're in the law, and you are overtly and specifically permitted to participate in these programs to hire people of disability or veterans and to bypass the normal competitive process. So even if a person wanted to try to make a claim that they were somehow disadvantaged by your using this program, they would have to actually not go after you because you're specifically and overtly allowed to do it. They would have to go and attack the law itself and to try to get some higher court to declare that Utah's Aesop and VEOP laws are somehow unconstitutional or unlawful. And even then, you have no liability, really, no personal liability, because you've been following the law. And as long as, if that were ever to happen, it won't, but if it were to ever happen, as long as you then stopped the process and continued behaving according to the most recent law, you would be perfectly fine. And so there's just not a lot of risk involved in participating in these. So tell me, what would an interview look like, or this process look like, if you were approaching that from an inward mindset, focusing on your specific needs and just your own?
Sorry, I hate awkward silence. I wasn't going to talk again, but I hate awkward silence, so I'm going for it. I would say, like, to pitch an example, if you were going to say, for example, look at someone for an eligibility position. I'll just give you an example because I'm in the SD, but that may be hard of hearing or have a disability with a hearing disability. You know, from an inward mindset, you would approach that as, oh, you know, how am I going to score? Am I going to defeat the scoring in this because I have to do it through, you know, written communication as opposed to through verbal in an interview? And so overlooking those type of considerations and really honing in on what really matters in terms of a person's qualifications.
Okay, that's good. Any others?
I was thinking the inward mindset of how is this person going to fit into my team? And are they going to feel that I picked them because they're disabled or a vet over maybe somebody else who might have been more qualified?
Okay, that's good. That's a really interesting thought. I had not thought of it in that particular way myself, so that's really good. Any others? I kind of see this as spanning the full spectrum, right? You can have an inward mindset where you're looking at, I don't want to be involved in this process because of all of those disadvantages, and I don't want to put forth the extra time, and I don't want to provide an advantage, and I just don't want to be bothered. I just want to stick with what I'm used to and what I'm doing. On the flip side, you can also have an inward mindset when you're looking at this and thinking, you know what, I'm just going to hire the first ASAP candidate that comes across. DHRM will have established that they have the minimum qualifications, so I get an ASAP candidate, that's just it. I don't want to bother with the rest of it. We're throwing them in there. I'm going to get brownie points from John because I'm participating in this program, and I'm going to be able to say, yes, my unit is doing exactly what the executive director's office wants, and that's really not what he wants. Right? We really want to be hiring people who are the right fit for the job, that have the skills and the mentality and the personality that are going to make them successful. We want people to be able to come in and be productive and useful. You don't do that by just throwing in the first person that throws in an application through this process either. You do have to make sure that they're right. But they shouldn't be disadvantaged because of our preconceived notions of disability. We should be willing and able to look at what they're able to do and say, you know what, I can give that person an opportunity if they are otherwise reasonable for the job. So, oh, I hit the wrong thing. So then what will it look like if we're taking into account all of the different stakeholders for this, the taxpayers, the applicants themselves, the employer, and yourself? I think that's what we were just talking about, this idea of looking at a person as a person and saying, is this somebody that is going to provide the very best benefit for our organization and have an opportunity? I can tell you that people who participate in ASAP, when you get a person who's got that opportunity, they tend to stay longer. They tend to be more engaged. They tend to be more grateful for the opportunity that you've just given them. It's a great opportunity to do good for everybody all the way around. So best opportunity to avoid whatever risk is there, just make sure you're spending the time with us. Talk to your analyst as you're going through the recruitment. If you have questions, talk about how to ask questions or what questions ask, talk to your specialist. Engage these other resources that we have, Leah Lobato and some of the others that can provide some assistance. But recognize this as a great opportunity to take people who can really use the opportunity and put them into positions where they can really make a difference for you and really help your numbers soar. So Any questions at all about any portion of what we've talked about today? Okay, Bart, any closing thoughts?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
First, just wanted to thank everyone for your attendance, taking an hour out of your day. I know you've got busy schedules, and I think just to wrap up, one of the things that I think will make this most successful is a piece that really hasn't yet been put in place, but you can take the steps to do that. And that is really the marketing, the outreach. I want to tell you what happened at Workforce Services in its veterans outreach last year. This is what John shared in his in the recent veterans conference held in the fall. So he issued a call to action and talked to me quite a bit about this, about how do we get more, how do we do more and hire more veterans. And he really at first wanted to kind of put almost a quota. Let's try and hire X number of veterans. And I said, you know what, I think the better way to do that is to do what we can entirely control, and that is a lot more outreach, because if we do that, there will be more veterans that understand and are aware of the jobs, and therefore probably more people will apply. I think we'll see things just fall into place naturally because of those efforts. Here's what actually happened between the year that he issued a call to action and last year. Number of applications from veterans went up by 250%. The number of veterans interviewed for Workforce Services jobs went up by 30%. The number of veterans hired into Workforce Services jobs increased from one year to the next by 300%. And that was not by saying we're going to hire X number of veterans. It was by doing the outreach. So I think this is an opportunity to engage with the Governor's Committee, with Leah, USOR, to see what can we do in Workforce Services to, are there more, for example, disability fairs that we could host or that we could participate in? Is there language that we can include maybe as standard language in all of our job announcements to advertise? We're interested in you if you have a disability, apply with us. We're interested in you if you're a veteran, apply with us. Those types of things. So as you get ready to post your jobs, talk to your division director, division directors talk to your deputies. I think it's probably a partnership as well with communications on marketing materials that we have out there, including language that specifically says, if you have a disability, if you're a veteran, we're interested in you. We want you to apply. I don't think these populations are used to seeing that type of thing in marketing and in job announcements. So that's, I think, the area, probably the final step that we have to do to really make this work. And I think we can make a big difference for populations that honestly deserve it. And we can do something to help them. So I leave you with that. And then also, there's been a few questions about how do I get credit, which is really important because you need credit for taking this. A quiz is being developed and it will be sent to you by the end of the day today out to all leadership. So if you go on to the learning portal and you'll get instructions on how to do that. Take the quiz. That will be how you get credit. We'll make sure that the questions are really hard, so you have to take it 10 or 12 times. I'm kidding. We'll make it easy, but that's how you'll get credit for taking the course. So any other questions before we wrap up? All right. I think that's it. Thanks for your attendance. Appreciate it.